The thunder of engines roared through the quiet streets as the biker club rode into town, their black leather jackets glistening under the afternoon sun. They looked fierce, tattoos, steel boots, and cold eyes that made most people step aside. But none of them expected that, within hours, they would be standing outside a small, broken house, their hearts burning with anger and compassion for a little girl whose trembling voice had shattered their world. Before we dive in, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for what's right, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that touch the soul. It all started on a chilly evening in a small town where life moved slowly, and everyone seemed to know each other's secrets. At the edge of town, in a tiny blue-painted house, lived a 7-year-old girl named Mia and her grandmother, Grace. Grace had raised Mia alone since her parents' tragic car accident years ago. Though age had slowed her down, her spirit was strong. She spent her days baking cookies for the neighbors, knitting scarves for the homeless, and telling Mia bedtime stories that always ended with a promise. No matter what happens, kindness will always come back to you. One afternoon, Grace went to the local store with Mia to buy some bread and milk. The store owner, a grumpy man named Vince, had always been harsh, but that day something in him snapped. Grace politely reminded him that he had given her the wrong change. Instead of apologizing, Vince shouted at her, calling her names, accusing her of trying to cheat him. When she tried to explain, he struck her hard across the face. The old woman stumbled and fell to the ground, clutching her chest in pain. Mia screamed, running to her grandmother, tears streaming down her face. The few customers inside froze in shock. Vince yelled for them to leave, threatening anyone who dared to speak up. With trembling hands, Mia helped her grandma to her feet and led her out, whispering through sobs, "It's okay, Grandma, I'll get help." Outside, on the corner of the street, a group of bikers had stopped for coffee at a small diner. They were known as the Iron Guardians, a rough-looking but tight-knit group of men and women who had dedicated their club to helping those who couldn't defend themselves. Their leader, Ryan, a tall man with a deep scar on his arm and a heart as soft as the teddy bear he once gave his niece, noticed the little girl crying across the street. Mia, clutching her teddy bear against her chest, ran toward them without fear. Her voice was small but filled with desperation as she cried, "He hit my grandma." Her words silenced the entire diner. The bikers turned, their eyes narrowing, their muscles tensing. Ryan knelt down to her level, gently wiping her tears with his gloved hand, and asked softly, "Where is she, sweetheart?" Mia pointed to the corner where Grace sat on the curb, pale and gasping for breath. Ryan rushed over, calling for an ambulance, while another biker, Sophie, took off her jacket and wrapped it around the shivering old woman. Within minutes, sirens filled the air. Grace was taken to the hospital and Mia refused to leave her side. As the doctors worked to stabilize her, Ryan waited outside the emergency room, fists clenched, his mind racing. He wasn't a man of many words, but one thing burned inside him. No one should ever lay a hand on the innocent, especially someone's grandmother. Later that night, after making sure Grace was safe and stable, Ryan walked out into the parking lot. The rest of the bikers gathered around, the sound of engines echoing softly like a heartbeat. "He hit her," Ryan said coldly, his eyes glinting in the dim hospital lights. "An old woman in front of her granddaughter." The group fell silent. Then one by one they nodded. They didn't believe in revenge, but they believed in justice. The next morning, Vince opened his store as usual. He didn't expect to see a row of motorcycles lined up outside his door, their chrome gleaming under the sun. The Iron Guardians stood silently, their presence alone enough to make people stop and stare. Ryan walked up to the store entrance and pushed the door open. The bell above the door jingled nervously. Inside, Vince froze. He recognized Ryan instantly, not by name but by the look in his eyes. That look of controlled rage that only appears in men who have seen too much pain in their lives. Ryan didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stepped closer and said in a low voice, "Do you remember an old lady you hit yesterday? She's in the hospital right now because of you." Vince tried to speak, but no words came. Ryan leaned in slightly. "You think hitting an old woman makes you strong?" he asked. "It doesn't, it makes you a coward." He turned to the others and nodded. One of the bikers walked over to the counter, dropped an envelope full of money on it and said, "That's for all the groceries that woman and her granddaughter will need from now on. And you're going to deliver them personally. You'll apologize and you'll make it right. Or we'll make sure everyone in this town knows what kind of man you really are." Vince's hands trembled. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of shame pressing down on him. His anger faded into regret as he remembered the look on Grace's face, the shock, the pain, the disappointment. The bikers left quietly, their engines roaring once more as they disappeared down the road, leaving behind a trembling man and a small town that would never look at him the same way again. Days later, Grace was discharged from the hospital. She was weak but smiling. Mia ran to her, hugging her tightly as the bikers watched from the doorway. Grace looked at Ryan, eyes filled with tears, and whispered, "Thank you for helping us." Ryan just nodded, replying gently, "We just did what anyone should do." A week passed before Vince gathered the courage to visit Grace's house. He stood outside with a paper bag full of groceries and flowers in his hand. When Grace opened the door, he could barely look her in the eyes. His voice shook as he said, "I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong." Grace studied him for a long moment, then quietly said, "It's never too late to change." She took the bag from his hands and closed the door softly. From that day on, Vince began to change. He started offering free groceries to elderly customers, sponsoring local charities, and greeting people with kindness. The town noticed, but it wasn't fear that drove him. It was guilt and the hope of redemption. The biker gang never returned to confront him again, but sometimes he saw them ride through town, their engines echoing like thunder in the distance. He knew they were still watching, making sure justice lived quietly in their shadow. As for Mia, she would often sit by her grandma's side, holding her teddy bear, looking out the window whenever she heard the sound of motorcycles. Grace would smile softly and say, "See, sweetheart, even the toughest hearts can protect the gentlest souls." And Mia believed her because she had seen it with her own eyes, the day the bikers came to stand up for her grandma. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to help us spread messages of kindness, courage, and compassion around the world. Sparkle's special request: tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Ryan's place? Would you have confronted Vince or tried to forgive him? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose to protect, not to fight. Because kindness, even when it roars like thunder, is still kindness at heart.